Today is Juneteenth 2025, a day that commemorates the end of slavery in America. As we celebrate freedom, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. Tennis, the sport we love, still carries the DNA of exclusion. From Althea Gibson breaking barriers in 1950 to Coco Gauff facing discrimination in 2025, the fight for equality in tennis spans 75 years. Today, we examine why this sport, built on country club culture and privilege, remains one of the last bastions of systemic racism in professional athletics.
Tennis is unique among major sports because it was designed to exclude. Country clubs, private courts, expensive equipment, these weren't accidents, they were features. The sport's infrastructure was built to maintain racial and economic segregation. When we see modern racism in tennis, we're seeing the echoes of a system that was never fully dismantled.
People ask why tennis has so few black champions compared to other sports. The answer isn't talent. It's access, acceptance, and systemic barriers that start in childhood and continue through professional careers. From Althea Gibson to the Williams sisters to Coco Gauff, every generation has had to fight the same battles their predecessors thought they'd won.
Today on Juneteenth, we're telling the story tennis doesn't want to tell. How a sport built on exclusion continues to exclude. How champions are diminished, barriers persist, and progress remains frustratingly slow. This isn't just tennis history. This is American history playing out on courts around the world. Our story begins in 1950, when Althea Gibson stepped onto the manicured lawns of Forest Hills, Queens, the first black player to compete at the U.S. National Championships. She was constantly bombarded with racial slurs from spectators. Born to sharecroppers in South Carolina, Gibson represented everything the tennis establishment feared: talent that couldn't be contained by color barriers.
Most of us who aspire to be tops in our fields don't really consider the amount of work required to stay tops. I played with any kid on the block. It didn't matter whether he was white, brown, black, or yellow.
Gibson's challenge wasn't just athletic, it was existential for tennis. She had to be perfect in ways white players never did. Any flaw would be attributed to all black players who might follow. The pressure was crushing: represent your entire race while trying to win tennis matches against players who saw you as an intruder.
Gibson broke through, winning the French Open in 1956, Wimbledon and U.S. Nationals in 1957 and 1958. She became undisputed world number one. But her success didn't open floodgates. It opened a small crack that the tennis establishment worked to seal. For decades after Gibson, black players remained virtually invisible in professional tennis.
That gap between Gibson and the next generation of black champions reveals the truth about tennis. Individual excellence doesn't dismantle systemic barriers. The sport's structure, expensive, exclusive, geographically concentrated in affluent areas, continued to exclude black youth regardless of Gibson's achievements.
Fast forward to the 1990s. Venus and Serena Williams burst onto the scene with unprecedented power, athleticism, and confidence. But they also faced something Gibson never dealt with: the modern media machine, amplifying both their achievements and the racist reactions to them.
The Williams sisters represented a fundamental threat to tennis's self-image. They were black, they were dominant, they were unapologetically confident, and they came from Compton, not country clubs. Tennis had to grapple with champions who looked nothing like the sport's traditional image and everything like its future.
Racist attacks began immediately. In 2001, at Indian Wells, the Williams family faced traumatic racial abuse. Richard Williams later described hearing spectators calling him the N-word and saying, "I wish it was 1975, we'd skin you alive." The sisters boycotted the tournament for 14 years.
I've been talking about this my whole career. It's been one thing after another. Now we as black people have a voice, and technology has been a huge part of that. We see things that have been hidden for years. The things that we as people have to go through.
The Williams sisters endured what researchers call racialized policing, excessive scrutiny of their behavior, appearance, and conduct that white players never faced. Venus penalized for beads falling from her hair. Serena's catsuit banned. Drug testing at rates far higher than their peers. Every success questioned, every reaction judged.
Numbers tell the story of tennis's continued exclusion. Since 1990, only 2 black men have won ATP Masters 1000 events. In the current top 50 men's rankings, only 2 are black. The women's game is slightly better, but still dramatically underrepresents black talent compared to the general population.
These aren't coincidences, they're the predictable result of systemic barriers. The average cost of developing a competitive junior tennis player is over $50,000 annually. Most black families can't access that level of investment. The sport remains geographically concentrated in affluent, predominantly white communities.
Enter Coco Gauff, the newest inheritor of this complex legacy. At 16, she stood in Delray Beach, Florida, and delivered a speech that connected her grandmother's civil rights struggles to modern injustice. Her words echo across 75 years of black tennis pioneers.
I think it's sad that I'm here protesting the same thing that my grandmother did 50 plus years ago. The silence of the good people is worse than the brutality of the bad people. If you are choosing silence, you're choosing the side of the oppressor.
Gauff represents both progress and persistence of problems. She's a Grand Slam champion, Olympic flag bearer, and highest paid female athlete. But she still faces the same undermining of achievements that Gibson and the Williams sisters endured. When Sabalenka called her victory magical, she was using the same dismissive language that's haunted Black champions for decades.
Gauff's grandmother, Yvonne Odom, was the first Black student to integrate Seacrest High School in 1961. 3 generations later, her granddaughter is still fighting for recognition and respect in tennis. This continuity of struggle reveals how little has fundamentally changed in the sport's power structures.
It's a crazy time to be a Floridian, especially a Black one at that. There's been multiple times this year where I feel like I always have to be an advocate for myself on the court. It always happens to me. It happened to Serena.
Gauff's comment about always having to advocate for herself captures the exhausting reality of being Black in tennis. You're not just playing tennis, you're constantly defending your right to be there, your achievements, your reactions, your very presence in spaces that were designed to exclude you.
Persistence of these barriers reveals something uncomfortable about tennis culture. This isn't just about individual racism. It's about a sport whose DNA was coded for exclusion and has never undergone the fundamental restructuring necessary for true inclusion.
Compare tennis to football or basketball sports that democratized through public schools and youth leagues. Tennis remained privatized, expensive, and geographically isolated in wealthy communities. The barriers aren't accidental, they're architectural. The sport was built this way intentionally.
Modern tennis racism has evolved from overt slurs to coded language. Black players are described as athletic and unpredictable, while white players are intelligent and strategic. Serena's power is natural advantage, while Federer's technique is genius. The language perpetuates stereotypes while appearing neutral.
This coded racism is particularly insidious because it maintains plausible deniability. When commentators consistently describe Black players' success as athletic rather than strategic, they're perpetuating racial stereotypes while claiming to be colorblind. It's racism with a tennis whites dress code.
Financial barriers remain staggering. Developing a competitive junior player costs more than many families' entire annual income. This isn't just about tennis lessons. It's about travel, equipment, coaching, tournament fees, and access to facilities that remain concentrated in affluent, predominantly white communities.
When people ask why there aren't more Black tennis champions, the answer is in those numbers. A $54,000 annual investment is impossible for most Black families. The talent exists, the access doesn't. We're not missing Black champions because of ability. We're missing them because of economics and geography.
Today, as Coco Gauff posted, "Freedom for all is worth celebrating. Happy Juneteenth." From Berlin, she embodies both the progress and persistent problems in tennis. Black woman celebrating freedom while competing in a sport that still struggles with inclusion. The irony is stark, the symbolism powerful.
Gauff's Juneteenth message while competing in Berlin captures the ongoing struggle perfectly. She's celebrating the end of slavery while still fighting for full acceptance in a sport that was designed to exclude people who look like her. The freedom is legal, but the equality remains elusive.
Pattern is clear across 75 years. Every generation of Black tennis champions faces the same core challenges. Individual excellence breaks barriers temporarily, but systemic change requires confronting the sport's fundamental structure and culture. That confrontation has been consistently avoided or delayed.
Real change requires more than celebrating individual champions. It requires dismantling the barriers that make those champions so rare. Public courts, school programs, affordable equipment, diverse coaching, and challenging the country club culture that still dominates tennis leadership and decision-making.
On Juneteenth 2025, tennis stands at a crossroads. It can continue celebrating isolated champions while maintaining exclusive structures, or it can undergo the fundamental transformation necessary for true inclusion. The choice will determine whether future generations still fight the same battles Gibson began 75 years ago.
Dr. Mitchell Marcus, thank you for this essential conversation. As we commemorate Juneteenth 2025, we must acknowledge tennis's uncomfortable truth. From Althea Gibson's barriers in 1950 to Coco Gauff's advocacy in 2025, Black champions have consistently faced discrimination, diminishment, and denial of their achievements. The sport that prides itself on tradition must confront which traditions it chooses to preserve. This episode was brought to you by Unstructei, where we examine the stories sports don't want to tell. Today on Juneteenth, we've traced 75 years of struggle for equality in tennis. From Gibson breaking color barriers while facing racial slurs, to the Williams sisters enduring systematic discrimination while dominating their sport, to Coco Gauff advocating for justice while celebrating championships. Heroes of American tennis are also heroes of American civil rights, using their platforms to fight for justice while excelling in a sport designed to exclude them. When Althea Gibson stepped onto Forest Hills in 1950, she carried the hopes of a people fighting for recognition. When Serena Williams called out sexism and racism throughout her career, she continued that fight. When Coco Gauff spoke at Black Lives Matter rallies at 16, she proved the struggle continues. Tennis's diversity problem isn't about lacking talent in Black communities. It's about maintaining barriers that prevent that talent from developing and thriving. The $54,000 annual cost of competitive junior tennis isn't accidental. It's architectural exclusion disguised as market forces. Today, as we celebrate Juneteenth and the end of slavery, we must ask, when will tennis truly free itself from the exclusion embedded in its foundation? The champions are ready. They always have been. The question is whether tennis is ready for them. Freedom for all is worth celebrating, but equality for all is worth fighting for. Thanks for watching, and remember, some stories are too important to leave untold, especially on days that matter most.